few words to begin with. Obviously, the sentencing that has taken place today recognises the severity and the seriousness of the offences that have been committed against the Scottish National Party. So I welcome the sentence that has been allocated, and I hope this provides some answers and some closure for members of the party who will feel deeply let down by the betrayal of trust, as I feel let down by the betrayal of trust by Peter Murrell in this particular case. And the judge was crystal clear that there was a betrayal of trust of members of the Scottish National Party, and that is of the greatest of concern to me. Obviously, since I assumed the leadership of the Scottish National Party, I've put in place a range of measures to ensure that we have the strongest and highest standards of governance, and those standards of governance are applied at all times in relation to the financial and other operational matters of the party. So I'm now happy to answer questions. We'll take them one at a time.
Do you expect any compensation as a result of this?
As
well as the £400,000 that you're due back?
Well, that's still a live issue that we are exploring as a party. I want to make sure that the party's losses are fully addressed by the compensation arrangements that have been put in place. Obviously, there's a confiscation order being sought by the Crown, which always has implications for our compensation claims. But I want to make sure that the party there is a remedy for the party out of this issue.
First Minister, we heard in court today that Peter Murrell, through his lawyer, accepts full responsibility for his actions. He spoke about feelings of guilt and remorse. He spoke about recognising the impact this has had on the SNP. Do you think that you can ever forgive him? Does he deserve forgiveness?
I'm a person, like I am a forgiving person. It's part of, and it's maybe not the day to go into this. It's part of what my faith is about. It's about forgiving people when they make mistakes. I don't believe in my faith that people should carry the mistakes that they make forever. So at a very deeply personal level about anybody, not in this particular case, I am a forgiving person. It might not be the most suitable role to be involved in politics, but that is who I am. But I cannot understate the sense of hurt and distress and betrayal that I feel about what has happened here, because as I've recounted to you all on previous occasions, I think, and I answered this in my question to you, Catherine, at the press conference on the day of the guilty plea being offered, that I think constantly of the people, the good people I know, who've worked extraordinarily hard to raise very small sums of money on a constant basis to make sure we could take forward our work. And £400,000 of that has been stolen, and I just can't reconcile that with my view of how people should act.
First Minister, do you think without an inquiry, questions around this are ever going to go away for you or for anyone who is close to the Murrells? Well,
I think there's a very clear criminal justice conclusion that's been arrived at from this case. Peter Murrell has admitted his guilt of embezzling over £400,000 from my party, and he did that by subverting the controls and the procedures that we had in place to do so. Hence, it's all a criminal act. So I think we know the answers to these issues. We know the questions that have had to be addressed here. It's been the subject of a lengthy police investigation taking a number of years, and ultimately a successful prosecution resulting in a guilty plea. I think that explains clearly to people that Peter Murrell acted in a criminal way. He subverted our systems, he embezzled £400,000, and he is now experiencing a very lengthy jail sentence as a consequence.
First Minister, are you any clearer to understanding why Peter Murrell did this?
I honestly cannot explain that to you, Glenn, and from the limited, I've not had a chance. I've obviously been tied up this morning with Cabinet and subsequent ministerial meetings, so I've not been able to consume all of the details from the court. But as I understand it, I think the judge has made clear he can see he's no clearer about understanding why this was undertaken. and I share that opinion.
Will you visit them in prison to try to understand?
I don't think I will, no.
First Minister, what confidence can SNP members have that the new governance procedures that you have in place would catch something like this again if you don't investigate how it was able to happen in the first place, and why people who were just asking basic questions about the accounts, they had no idea obviously that embezzlement was going on, weren't given the information and had to resign?
I think the standards of transparency that I have insisted upon and that I preside over provide that reassurance to members of the party. So as I've explained on previous occasions, any payments that have got to be made have got to be seen by 3 sets of eyes before they can be authorised for payment. The National Executive Committee sets a budget on an annual basis, and performance against that budget is reported to the National Executive Committee on a monthly basis with full disclosure, and the ability in a National Executive over which I preside, although I don't chair it, that is encouraged to ask questions about any issues that are on people's minds. And then there is the full financial reporting that we undertake to our National Council, a body which I've restored into the party's governance. So in all of these respects, the party has an extensive and detailed level of financial scrutiny which I preside over at all times.
So do you think nobody now within your party is above being questioned if NEC members, you know, want to say, well, what was spending that money on, or what is that, and you saying that off? That is now all open and transparent.
Absolutely, nobody is above questioning in the SNP these days.
Is Nicola Sturgeon, do you think she should apologise to SNP members for the crimes that were committed when she was leader?
Well, the person who's responsible for the crimes is Peter Murrell.
Can we clarify Lindsay's question on forgiveness? Do you forgive him?
Well, I tried to give an explanation to all of this. I'm a person of faith. I believe in forgiveness. But please, Colin, I'm not going to say any more about that. It's a deeply personal point about how I feel about other human beings, and I'm not going to be any more specific about this. I've explained the hurt and the distress that I feel. Now, I am very much engaged in answering the detailed and follow-up questions, but I ask for a little bit of respect on this question, because you're exploring questions about how I feel about my faith, which are a matter for me. And on this particular question, Colin, it is agony.
John, can I first minister? Lord Young today said the embezzlement was not particularly sophisticated. Doesn't the SNP owe members an apology for the controls in place at the time, maybe inadequate?
Well, I acknowledge what Lord Young has said, but I'm also mindful of the comments that have been made by Police Scotland about the complexity of the case, and obviously the length of time and the resources that have taken to get to the bottom of this particular case. So I hear those comments, but I also rely on the fact that there has been such an extensive and deep examination of all of these questions that's taken such a long time with so many resources, that I think it demonstrates this has been an operation that has gone to considerable lengths to conceal the effects of what Peter Murrell was doing.
So no apology for 400 grand?
When I spoke to the media on the date of the guilty plea, I apologised to party members whose money had not been used for the purposes it should be used for, and I reiterate those comments today.
John, can I ask a question about the prison's decision today and what the government's decided to do? I mean, a lot of people think that you've been dragged kicking and screaming at great public expense to this, and don't you owe for Women Scotland an apology?
Well, obviously this is on a completely different matter, but the issues in the case about imprisonment of transgender prisons involve a complicated interaction, as Lady Ross's judgment demonstrates, of the Equality Act and the convention rights that come from the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, those issues are intensely complex, which is why this issue has been resolved by the Court of Session. But what the government has concluded at Cabinet this morning is that we should we should not appeal this judgment, and the Scottish Prison Service is now taking practical steps to implement the consequences of that judgment, and they have of course withdrawn the guidance that was in place that led to the decisions that are part of this process.
Yeah, but after a substantial amount of public money challenging that in the courts, and well, do you apologise to everyone in Scotland? This should have been, after the Supreme Court judgment, maybe fairly obvious that this would go in this direction.
As I said, I think there are complex issues, and government has got to be able to seek the guidance of the courts from time to time about the interaction of complex legislation. So I cannot apologise for that, because it's an essential act of government to make sure that we're acting lawfully. And sometimes that has to be challenged in courts. Obviously, I would rather avoid that if I possibly can do. But sometimes these issues have to be challenged in the court to establish the certainty that is required, because government will make its best endeavours to come to a considered legal position based on the interaction of different pieces of legislation. But we only get certainty when the court determines that, which we got from Lady Ross on Friday.
First Minister, can I ask you, Nicola Sturgeon's lawyer today says it's disgraceful for us to be asking her questions about her account of this. Do you believe what she has said about her knowledge of Peter Murrell's embezzlement, and do you think it's disgraceful that we keep asking her questions about it?
Well, obviously, I'm here answering your questions, so
How was Peter Murrell?
Please. I'm here answering your questions, and I'm always here answering your questions. So I believe it's important that I answer your questions. And on and on your earlier point, I accept Nicola Sturgeon's explanation of what she set out.
How was Peter Murrell able to sign off his employer expenses?
Well, that's an issue that's been remedied, and it can't happen anymore.
Does Nicola Sturgeon and other senior figures in the SNP have questions to answer over why they didn't detect this over so many years?
I think where you believe that there are financial controls in place, I think it's a reasonable assumption to believe that they're going to be exercised, particularly in an environment where there was obviously a very heavy reliance on trust. And it's not surprising, because we're all supposed to be in the SNP working together with the same endeavour to achieve our political objectives. You don't naturally go through life believing that somebody in your midst is embezzling £400,000 over a 12-year period. It's not. Ordinarily, it wouldn't have popped into my head to think that was likely to have been happening. No. We're going to operate on a basis here where I'm very happy to answer your questions, but I am not going to be constantly interrupted. So, where we have, there's a reasonable expectation that procedures are put in place and that they operate appropriately with sufficient checks and balances. Now, clearly those checks and balances were subverted. So we now have in place very robust governance procedures to make sure that we have proper and effective financial and operational governance in the party.
First Minister, do you accept that in retrospect, having a situation in which the leader of the party is married to the chief executive inhibited scrutiny in this case?
I've previously accepted that that's not been a good arrangement.
First Minister, do you agree with the sentence that was handed down against Peter Murrell today?
Well, it's not for me to pass. Hold on a second. It's not for me to pass judgment about sentences that have been laid down by the independent judiciary. The Lord President was very clear to me when I assumed office in front of him a few weeks ago that the independence of the judiciary was sacrosanct, and I intend to respect that.
Are you concerned as party leader that the SNP could face a class action lawsuit from donors who asked for refunds but not received?
Well, I'm, as I understand it, and I've given this. Oh, my wait till it's 12:46 from Edinburgh Waverley is currently approaching Haymarket. There have been requests for members to have donations refunded, and we have done so. Now, I can't off the top of my head remember the number of cases and the sums involved, but we've provided that information before, and we'll happily furnish it with you again. If there are other people who wish to have their donations returned, then I will have that considered. Now, when we looked at some of the people who said they donated money, all those applications were considered. So I'm not conscious of people who've made applications and who've not had their money back. But if people wish to do so, then of course the party will consider all of those applications.
Can you just ask very, very quickly about the £100,000 loan? Now that proceedings are no longer active, do you understand what that loan was for at the time?
No, I don't. No.
First Minister, you've known Peter Murrell since you were teenagers. Do you feel any guilt that you didn't do more to stop him?
Well, I think I've set out in my answers today as openly as I possibly can do that nothing would have given me the sense that this was a likely course of action to take, a likely circumstance to face. She would never have got me speculating that this is something I should have been concerned about, because of my knowledge of Peter Murrell and of the commitment that we all bring to the work of the Scottish National Party and the cause of independence. So, aside from anything else, Paul, as I think you know, I wasn't serving office bearer of the Scottish National Party from 2004 to 2024, so I had no operational responsibility to look at these questions, or indeed operational right to look at these things. But is it distressing? Is it hurtful? Is it agony? Yeah, it's all of those things. And as I say, but part of what I view as my responsibility as leader of the Scottish National Party today is to make sure that the SNP operates with clear and effective governance that protects the interests of the party, and that's uppermost in my thinking at all times.
Are you asking the motorhome back? Are you going to ask the motorhome returned to the SNP for one of these?
Well, that's all tied up with issues around the confiscation order. I have, let me just make it clear to you, the SNP has no use for a motorhome. But it is part of the £400,000 embezzlement, and that's what we are trying to secure by the pursuit of the compensation order, which follows the confiscation order of the Crown.
First Minister, sorry, just to clarify that, you say that the SNP had no use for a motorhome.
I said has no use.
Has no use.
Has no use.
In 2021 or 23, when the first stories about this was brought out, we were told by senior members of the party that it's going to be used for a COVID election. I mean, is that?
Well,
what's your take on that?
I think I've said this before. Like I hired a coach for about 2.5 weeks in the election campaign. I had to go through the ordeal of having my face emblazoned on the side of the coach. I could justify that as being something useful. You might not have thought it was useful, but I thought it was quite useful as a means of transportation around the country. Indeed, some people got a nice journey in it as well. But we'll not name names. A rational reason for having arrangements of that sort to get around the country and to promote your election campaign. So I wasn't privy to any thinking about the use of the motorhome, but I can say to you today the SNP's got no use for a motorhome, and I couldn't see how that would have a role to play in our campaigning efforts. Okay.
First Minister, the court heard today that Peter Murrell has been ostracised by his colleagues and peers. Were you ever in touch with him during the police investigation? Did you ever
Now, I answered a question before from one of your colleagues, where the last time I spoke to Peter was just days before I stood down as Deputy First Minister in March of 2023, and I haven't spoken to him since. Okay, thank you very much.